Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There is a delay to the start of this meeting. We're having to say that there's a few IT problems is an understatement. We cannot get the screens up for projection. That's one of the problems, unfortunately. So that we may move to a deferral. It won't be a popular thing, I know, on a night like this, but if the decision makers can't see the screen, I'm sure you wouldn't want to go ahead on that basis.
Direction of planning you suggested, could we defer for 10 minutes to see if we can rearrange the room possibly, so that it's important that the members and us, whoever's a decision maker, I'm not actually a decision maker, but I'm an advisor, but can see what they need to see. Apparently it's photographs of site visits. That's
I've had some advice. If we could defer for 10 minutes, we're going to give the IT guy a call out to come and see if he can sort things out. So bear with us. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for bearing with us. Good evening, members, council. And those at home that hopefully you're watching this. I can't promise, but hopefully you are. Welcome to the Planning Committee, Tuesday 30th. Sorry, the 27th of February. Forgot the month then for a minute. Can we get rid of that echo? Is there going to be echo all night? Echo. Is there an echo coming through on there? Where's the echo coming from? I certainly have.
It's everyone's laptop, so mine's on silent.
Yeah, it's just the one that this one.
Testing 1, 2, 3. We'll get there in a minute. One. No, we're still getting it. One, two. That's done it, yeah. Okay, finally. Item 1. Apologies. Do we have any apologies this evening?
Councillor Dave Jones.
Councillor Dave Jones. Do we have a substitute?
Not this evening, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2 of the agenda. Declarations of interest. Are there any members here got any interests, declarations to make on the agenda this evening? I look around, I don't see any acknowledgements, so that's a no for me. Item 3. Minutes of the previous meeting. It was held on the 30th of January this year. Are we happy to take those as a true and accurate record of proceedings? I see a lot of nodding. I'll take that as sent. Thank you very much. Before I move on to the first substantive item of the agenda, could I remind people to switch their phones onto silent if they haven't already, or even better off if that suits them. I haven't been made of any aware of any fire alarms this evening, but anything's possible. Bear in mind, we've had some IT issues. So if that is the case and the alarm bells go, can you please make your way through the entrance through the library and out through the public doorways there. Okay, item 4, application for major development, land north of Muckleston Wood Lane and east of Rock Lane, Loggerheads. Over to you guys. We have a presentation on that.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for outline planning permission for the construction of up to 150 dwellings on land north of Muckleston Wood Lane, east of Rock Lane, Loggerheads. The application is for outline consent only, with all matters reserved apart from access. So the application site is located beyond but directly adjacent to the settlement boundary for the Loggerheads village envelope. Therefore, on that basis, the site is considered to be located within the open countryside. To the east of the site is White House Farm, a Grade 2 listed building that sits in an elevated position above the application site. Access to the development site is proposed to be taken directly from Muckleston Wood Lane. We have received amended plans during the course of the application, the first of which reduced the site area. So previously the red edge boundary came up to the caravan park with White House Farm. That's now been reduced, along with the number of dwellings from 200 to 150. There have also been revisions to the access arrangements to address concerns raised from the Highway Authority in relation to highway safety. So I'll run through some site photos now, but just for context, I'm going to start from the photos taken within the curtilage of White House Farm. Then we'll work our way down Muckleston Wood Lane, and then the photos go up Rock Lane towards the rear of the site. So this photo here is taken from the far western boundary of the caravan park adjacent to White House Farm. It's looking westwards towards the very eastern boundary of the application site. So where I'm just running the cursor here on the screen is the hedgerow that forms the eastern boundary of the application site, with the development then falling away towards Rock Lane. This is another view from the caravan park, but looking towards the southwest. You can just see on the left-hand side of the screen the built development backing on to Muckleston Wood Lane. And just through the tree canopy here, you can see the roofscape from the development at Tadgedale Quarry, which sits on the opposite side of Rock Lane. And then this final view from White House Farm is taken from the very northern edge, so the very far tip of the caravan park, and again, looking westwards towards the application site. So now we're looking down Muckleston Wood Lane. You can just see the entrance here to White House Farm, the caravan park and the property itself. So this gives a bit of wider context, I think, to the application site. You can see the more built-up development edge. So we've got the fence boundaries of the properties that back onto Muckleston Wood Lane, and then the open rural agricultural land on the opposite side, adjacent to the application site. So another image again taken from Muckleston Wood Lane, but we're looking eastwards here. So you've got the application site on the left-hand side of the screen, and here is the boundary, the hedgerow boundary that forms the eastern edge of the site. And again, you've got the existing more suburban development on the opposite side, and the junction here with Hunters Point. So this image is just taken from this this gated boundary here. So we're looking down northwards into the application site. You can see there the tree sort of that sits centrally within the site is to be retained. And then from the same point, but looking towards the western boundary of the site. So again, you can just see the boundary there with Rock Lane, the dense tree canopy, and then you've just got the roofscapes of the Tadgedale Quarry development. So this is another image just looking up eastwards up Muckleston Wood Lane, but this is just up from the junction with Rock Lane. You can see the hedgerow boundary that forms the front boundary of the site. I think it's probably just beyond this lamppost here where the new access arrangements are proposed. So here we're looking north up onto Rock Lane. You can see at this point the site is slightly elevated above the highway. And then this has just travelled slightly down into Rock Lane, and we're now looking towards the eastern boundary with White House Farm. So this is White House Farm here, and then the far boundary of the site. I think I'd say this part of the site is the most level. The gradient's quite gentle. You'll see in comparison as we move up to the site that the topography does change slightly. So again, another view from Rock Lane towards White House Farm. So we've got White House Farm here. But in this context, you can just see the extent of the development on Muckleston Wood Lane that's just beyond the front boundary of the site. Sorry, yeah. So here we're at the far northern boundary of the site. The telegraph poles, there is a sort of slight post and wire fence here. And we've got the roof of White House Farm. So here the gradient of the site is quite steep, sloping upward towards White House Farm. And then from the same viewpoint, but here we're looking back towards the southern end of the application site. So got the boundary here. And then a final view from Rock Lane. Just got the rural nature of the road. You've got the application site here, with the backdrop of the development there that's on Muckleston Wood Lane already. So in terms of the application and the assessment, the council currently cannot demonstrate a suitable supply of housing, and the plans and policies that are considered to be most relevant to housing provision are out of date. So on that basis, the tilted balance as outlined in paragraph 11D of the MPPF is engaged. It is noted that the site falls outside of the village envelope of loggerheads and so wouldn't accord in full with policy LMPP1 of the neighbourhood plan. However, paragraph 14 of the MPPF requires that in situations where 11D is engaged, the adverse impact of allowing development that conflicts with the neighbourhood plan is only likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits in cases where the plan is less than 5 years old and the plan contains policies and allocations to meet its identified housing requirements. As both of these criteria do not apply in this case, it cannot be said that the breach of the neighbourhood plan's policies is likely on its own to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. But this isn't to say that the plan and its policies are out of date. Officers have considered the acceptability of the site, reference from previous appeal decisions, and infrastructure within the village to support the proposed development. While it's considered that the site is in a sustainable location in terms of the local level facilities, there is a reliance on the car in order to access higher order goods and services. And so that does have to be afforded some weight in the balance. Turning to the reserve matter that's being considered, this is the proposed access arrangements, and the site access is taken directly from Muckleston Wood Lane. The layout and position of the access has been amended during the course of the application to address concerns that have been raised by the Highway Authority. So the access is now proposed to be positioned towards the southwestern corner of the site. So we've got Rock Lane here, and then the development is its proposed access. So it's been designed in such a manner that vehicles would be deterred from turning left out of the application site up to Muckleston Wood Lane. The access arrangements have been assessed by the Highway Authority and are considered to be acceptable from a design and highway safety perspective. The application is accompanied by transport assessments and travel plans, all of which have considered the wider and cumulative traffic implications of the development on the area, with a particular focus on a number of critical junctions around the village. These assessments are informed by traffic count data, collision data, and transport modelling to consider the potential impacts of the development, both as a standalone and in conjunction with other permitted development residential schemes within the area. This data has informed the level and type of off-site mitigation works that are proposed and has been assessed by Staffordshire County Council as a highway authority, who consider that the data is sufficient to demonstrate that the development, subject to conditions and the off-site highway works, would not have an unacceptable impact on highway safety or a severe cumulative impact on the road network. With regards to the setting of White House Farm, which is a Grade 2 listed building, pages 26 to 28 of the agenda report cover the assessment of the site in relation to the setting of this listed building. There is no physical harm to the building, so the consideration is whether the development has an impact on its setting. So on the screen now, it's an illustrative image, just showing a cross-section of the site and the views that may be taken from White House Farm. So when we're considering setting, it's important to remember that the setting of a listed building is more than just one view and a particular vantage point. So this image considers perhaps what is the most prominent view from the farmhouse in relation to the application site. But the position of the site, as well as the topography of the land, would ensure that the development would not harmfully encroach upon this agricultural setting to this particular part of the building, to an extent that would be anything more than at the lower end of less than substantial harm. So just to, I guess, show that point, this is the view taken from White House Farm, and the hedgerow boundary, the far eastern boundary of the application site runs here. So any other development, would then be falling away from that boundary down onto the sloping topography. So on the screen now, we've got the proposed master plan layout for the site. So whilst this is an application for outline permission, with only details of access to be considered, what also needs to be considered is whether the application site can suitably accommodate up to 150 dwellings alongside with the appropriate infrastructure such as public open space, landscaping and any other amenity space implications that must be considered. So whilst this layout is at this stage indicative, any permission granted would be linked to the master plan and vision outlined within the design and access statement. Officers have accepted that there would be some level of harm to the landscape, given that the dwellings and infrastructure would be introduced as part of this site, would be into a rural, undeveloped agricultural piece of land. However, the indicative master plan includes a good level of soft landscaping, a strong green infrastructure buffer around the perimeter of the site, and a low building density, all of which officers consider would soften the impacts of the development within both the immediate locality and the wider landscape. Moving to ecology, the applicant has submitted an ecological assessment with the application, which considers the impact of the proposed development upon protected species and habitats. This includes bats, newts, dormice, and birds. The information has been independently reviewed by the Staffordshire Council County Ecologist, who has accepted that subject to conditions, the development would not result in adverse harm to protected species. There have been objections and concerns that considering a development subject to pre-commencement conditions, particularly for bats, is not an acceptable approach. But officers have raised this matter specifically with the county ecologist to ensure that the use of pre-commencement conditions in this scenario is acceptable. And this expert advises that this approach is suitable based on the circumstances of the site. Therefore, subject to pre-commencement conditions to secure landscape enhancement and mitigation measures, as well as further surveys, the development would not result in harm to protected species. So that takes us to the planning balance assessment that's been made with this application. And on the basis that paragraph 11D in the tilted balance is engaged, officers have considered the harms versus the benefits of this proposal. Officers accept that harms to the scheme and the development include the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, harm to the character and appearance of the landscape, and the reliance on the private car for access to higher order services. But in turning to the benefits, these include the provision of 150 market homes, above policy compliant levels of affordable housing at 30%, above policy compliant levels of public open space within the site, and an additional financial contribution of £225,000 towards the delivery of sites LV1 and LV2, which are allocated for community sport and recreational uses within the neighbourhood plan.
Ladies and gentlemen, please could you refrain from shouting out, please, because it makes it very difficult for those that having hearing difficulties to pick up all the sounds. Thank you.
Thank you. In considering these in the balance, it's the opinion of officers that the benefits would on this occasion outweigh the harms that have been described. And as per the NPPF, the scheme is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie, for that. We have a number of speakers on this item, 4 exactly. Before I open it up to members, I'll take the speakers first, and we have the first speaker of the evening, Councillor Barry Panter. Would you like to take up a seat at the front here, please? Councillor Panter, just to remind you, you have 5 minutes to make your case. When it's down to 4 minutes, the clerk will remind you that you've got a minute remaining. Would you like to start when you're ready?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I start, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm only right to bring to your attention this article in today's issue of the Sentinel, which is somewhat prejudicial to this hearing. Campaigners set to lose the fight for homes is always inferring that the decision has also already been made. And I don't think it does much for the confidence of these good people here. So I would hope that the Chief Executive would take up this matter up with the Sentinel to not to have anything so prejudicial printed on the day that this hearing is going on. As regards the village of Loggerheads, well, it isn't a village anymore, Chairman, because these developments have destroyed the rural image of this lovely area. The town of Loggerheads would probably be a more appropriate method to say. as it said, it is outside the village envelope. There's a question, is there the housing need? Quite honestly, I firmly believe no, not in the sense that it's been given. This site is approximately half a mile from the nearest bus stop, and it would be quite unsafe for some people, especially the elderly and disabled, to walk that distance because there are no buses going up to this site at all, which means, of course, that there will be increased use of the motor car. There are no sources of employment within Logheads for the people who are moving into these houses to work in at all, which means commuting and further use of the motor car, further blotting the clean air of the area at the moment. The infrastructure, I firmly believe, cannot take much more development. The schools, 2 junior schools within the bounds of Logheads are almost full. And the Section 106 money that should be given to something like this on the last occasion was in fact given to Staffordshire Market Drayton instead of here. There are no senior schools at all. The nearest one is either Newcastle, Maidley, or if you've got to cross into Market Drayton, the Grove, I believe. There is no, the nearest doctors is 2 miles away in Ashley. There is no dentist whatsoever. The nearest one is either Newcastle or Market Drayton. The doctors in the evenings, their bus services are not available in the evenings. So anyone wants to use the doctors in the evening has got to drive, and there'd be more vehicle use again. Muckleston Wood Lane is not an ideal road for this sort of development because it is, to quite a certain extent, a rat run. The junction from Muckleston Wood Lane onto the A52 is extremely dangerous. And I believe this needs to be thoroughly looked at to start with. The road is not wide enough to take the increased use of traffic. I'm very worried about the entrances to this site because you've only got to get one accident outside the entrance to that, and it's going to block everything up whatsoever. It says, in fact, on page, I think 27 of your papers here, that Severn Trent Water have said that, no, it's not 27, it says somewhere else, sorry. The Severn Trent Water have got no real objection, although they realise there are some causes for concern, and the proposals, they have no objection to these proposals not changing, but they haven't yet clarified what these proposals are. I think you will see that there's also been over 430 odd objections, individual objections sent by the good people of Logheads to this council about this matter. I think that shows the grave concern that is felt in this area. It is totally unnecessary and not wanted whatsoever. The infrastructure is not that good. There is only one shop, supermarket, which will encourage more people to use cars to go to the main supermarkets all around the area. There's a number of roads are already been held up. And in fact, I think there's a proposal from Severn Trent to do main drainage work along the A53, which will include a lot of hold-ups and traffic lights for anything up to 9 or 10 months. I think that is only going to make matters worse because with the increased use of the lorries that are coming in and out. I think that when you look at some of the individual objections, which I think are proposed, which on page where we got page 35, the number of individual objections that have been listed to the sort of thing. You're actually losing a lot of your greenfield sites here because the farming area, it was a farming area, it is not anymore. Anyone that's living in the social housing that's been built on the site will probably not be able to afford to run a car or depend on buses to go to any jobs that are around there, which means the buses do not currently run at suitable hours for that sort of employment. You have traffic calming measures and not just there's mention, I believe, is made of chicanes being put on Muckleston Wood Lane. The design of that could well bring the boy racer types into thinking, chicanes, motor racing, and make it even more hazardous.
Would you like to wrap up?
Oh, it's
Councillor
fine.
Patter?
Chair, I think you'll see from the number of people here tonight that there's grave concern among the people of Lockheads for this proposal. It is not wanted any way, shape or form. So I would urge you and this committee to take heed of what these people have said, the objections that have been sent in, and reject this unnecessary proposal. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Councillor Patter. Thank you. Next speaker that we have is Parish Councillor Andy Swetnam, Logheads Parish Council. Are you there, Mr. Swetnam? There is indeed a button. You press when you're ready. Same applies, the same protocol. You've got 5 minutes to make your case. You'll be reminded after 4 minutes by the clock. Begin when you're ready.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Andy Swetnam. I'm the chairman of Loggerheads Parish Council, and I also chaired the process that created the Loggerheads Neighbourhood Plan. As you may be aware, part of the Loggerheads Neighbourhood Plan needed the requirement for a housing needs assessment. That housing needs assessment went through examination and was deemed fit for purpose. What that said was that from the period of 2013 to 2033, Loggerheads needed to grow by 396 houses. What you might not be aware of is annually we produce a monitoring document to see where we've got to with the neighbourhood plan. One of the things we monitor is how many houses are being built. Today, there are either been built or have plans to be built 430 houses. Now, we are only at year 11 in what is supposed to be a 20-year plan. On top of that, I note that the emerging local plan is talking about something like 354 houses per annum within the Newcastle and Lyme Borough Council area. What you might not appreciate is that Loggerheads represents about 2% of your total population. 2% of 354 is 7 houses. Now, your local plan is due to run from 2020 to 2040. Therefore, there would appear to be a discrepancy of 7 years. 7 years is 49 homes. I would bring you back to the figure of 430. 396 and 49 is 445. So what you've actually got is 16 years in your local plan to build 15 homes. That's infill. I would also like at this point to point out the Tadgedale Quarry development. What you might not appreciate is it's been mothballed. On Sunday, when I drove round it, there are about 35 buildings standing. But of those 35, at least 12 are somewhere between first fix and second fix and not even close to being sold. So really, there's a spare capacity in Tadgedale at the moment of about 125 houses. At 2:30 this afternoon, I went onto a website called On the Market. On the Market currently has 57 houses for sale within Loggerheads, and it does not include that 125. So what you've actually got is 182 houses potentially available to be bought in Loggerheads today. So why you would need another 150 is beyond me. That doesn't include the potential development that is at the end of Pinewood Road, which I believe is probably going to be used for what would have been council houses years ago, but that type of development. I did mention Tadgedale Quarry. Now, in 2017, Loggerheads Parish Council got involved in the appeal for that development as a Rule 6 party. I don't know if you would remember, but as a borough council, you turned that development down. And when you defended your position at the appeal, your main argument in that appeal hearing was that you compared Loggerheads with a community of a similar size. The community you compared us with was Eccleshall. And the reason you did it was because you were highlighting the lack of infrastructure and facilities that were in Loggerheads at the time. Today, Loggerheads is probably about 4,500 people. The sort of facilities we've got
1 minute.
is one football pitch. There is no multi-use games area within the village. There are no neighbourhood equipped areas for play within the village. The local co-op is already experiencing queues out to the main road because there is insufficient car parking there for people who want to use the shop. So basically, to sum it all up, there is already an excess of housing available within Loggerheads. And for the life of me, I can't see why you would want any more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sweatman. I was going to say thank you earlier, but your reception was very loud. We have the second objector, Mr. David Bailey, on behalf of residents. Would you like to come forward, Mr. Bailey? When you're ready, press the button in front of you. You have 5 minutes. You'll be reminded after 4 by the clerk.
Okay, my name is David Bailey, and as a resident, I speak on behalf of the Loggerheads Save Our Village Committee, who represent the people of the village that do not support any more expansion of it, because it's clearly unsustainable. The committee has a Facebook presence of 806 followers and has held 7 public meetings. We also speak, I think, for the 110 people here who have come together, and also those who are watching on YouTube tonight. We feel we represent the deep concerns of the vast majority of the village. Comments made by residents are universal. There's no more room on the roads, on the car parks, at the school. We've just heard that Ashley Surgery is now closed for new patients. There are no transport links of any use. A bus service 5 times a day is not fit for any working family. The recent massive in the region of 430 home expansion has encouraged a dead car-centric commuter village to be created. The growth of housing has not been matched by any significant infrastructure improvements. Our isolated village is being developed into a small town with none of a town's facilities. The developer says that there will be no harm to the character and appearance of the area or its infrastructure. As people who live here, we see this as highly flawed. Often just averages are measured without understanding that items such as traffic flow can have wide variations. I'm sure you might find the example of Friday afternoon in the summer. Everybody wanting to get to Mid Wales through Loggerheads sees the village jam-packed and really quite a dangerous place to be on the roads. We implore the planning committee as our democratically elected representatives to refuse this planning application, because within the 426 objections, there are justifiable and compelling reasons to do so. Although the site is now included in the emerging local plan, this is only because of this speculative planning application preying on the council's weakness of not having an up-to-date local plan. This site was rejected as a site for development by a council document in 2022. Another developer is already proposing a similar out-of-the-village envelope scheme in the area using this application as a test bed. The Highways Authority stated that roads were in a substandard condition in the area. The preceding highly convoluted and frankly dangerous traffic calming measures which have been proposed on the A53 and Muckleston Wood Lane are likely to cause more traffic congestion and risk than reduce it. I have before you here that 439-page traffic assessment produced by the developer, which promises that risks will be reduced. I hope you've seen the video submitted to the council on the 16th of February, which shows that a broken down car in exactly the same position as where the build out on the A53 was. And within 5 minutes, it created a 220-metre traffic jam. What is promised will not be delivered, only chaos. It's the same for things like bats, hedges, heritage assets, provision of affordable accommodation and public transport. There are lots of carefully crafted words, but minimal commitment.
1 minute.
And it's all designed to get you on the hook. We suggest that there are overwhelming planning reasons to refuse this application, and members of the council should be confident that such reasons could be sustained at any appeal brought by the developer. A weak assertion is made that this development outside the village envelope will be allowed at appeal, given the example of the nearby Tadgedale Quarry, which was granted. It was allowed mainly because it brought some brownfield land back into use by capping contaminated land. A more direct comparison to this application is that of Gravel Bank, next door to Tadgedale Quarry. Again, outside the village envelope, this appeal was dismissed given the harm to the character and appearance of the area. The application before you is not only very similar to Gravel Bank, but reasons for refusal are stronger because of highways, impact on the character and appearance, and impact on already stretched and isolated local services. One last sentence, could I say? I just finished by saying, can you think of refusing this because the adverse impacts are significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the benefits of this proposal? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Last but not least, the fourth speaker on behalf of Shropshire Homes Limited, Mr. Andy Sheldon. Would you like to come forward, sir? Mr. Sheldon, you've got 5 minutes. You've been reminded after 4 minutes with 1 minute remaining. Press the button on and off to stop it flashing if you wish. Press it again.
Hear me?
You may start.
Thank you. Okay, well, many thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name's Andy Sheldon and I'm the Land Director for Shropshire Homes. You've heard concerns expressed tonight and are no doubt aware that a lot of objections have been submitted following our application. I don't intend to respond to all of the issues that have been raised by objectors. The 5 minutes allocated doesn't really give enough time. Your officers will be able to respond to any detailed questions you may have. All of the matters raised tonight have been thoroughly assessed through the application process. You will have seen in the officer's report that all the issues have been addressed to the satisfaction of your officers. Perhaps the biggest issue that's been raised is highway safety. It's absolutely correct that this is rigorously tested during the application process, and a lot of time has been spent with your highways officers to ensure that the proposed access is safe and suitable. You will see from the report that your highways officers are satisfied that our proposals provide a suitable and safe access to and from the site. As well as the detailed comments, there is also the overriding question of the principle of development on this site. As you're aware, the borough doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply. This means that in planning terms, the current local plan is not a determining factor in any decision. Although the site lies outside the settlement boundary, there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. The council has identified this site as a proposed housing allocation within the local plan review. This is a very clear confirmation that the location is deemed to be suitable for development. We are very much in agreement with this, as evidenced by the strong sales at our current developments in Loggerheads. It's also important to note that in addition to significant contributions to education and health, we will pay £225,000 directly to the Parish Council towards the development of land at Market Drayton Road for sports pitches and a community hub.
Please, ladies and gentlemen.
It's important to note that the money will be paid directly to the Parish Council to achieve those aims specified in the neighbourhood plan. None of the previous housing developments in Loggerheads have provided contributions directly to the local community. This payment is over and above policy requirements and will meet an identified need within Loggerheads specified within the neighbourhood plan. We are also addressing the identified need for smaller, affordable houses and bungalows in the village. 30% of all the proposed dwellings on the site are affordable. This will provide 45 affordable homes, which is 5% over and above current policy requirement. The scheme is very much a landscape-led proposal with a significant over-provision of open space against policy requirements, which can be seen in the master plan accompanying the application. This will lead to a development that is appropriate to its edge of settlement location. Finally, I really do want to emphasise that unlike other applications you will have determined, we aren't a faceless national company using consultants to deliver the message for a speculative application. We're a local company who take pride in what we do and who communicate with the communities we work in. We've worked with the Parish Council on our current developments at Market Drayton Road, and this has helped us understand the need for financial assistance in bringing about the sports facilities which this application will deliver. I do appreciate that it can be difficult to assess an application when there are a large number of objectors present, but when making a decision, I'd urge you to judge the merits of the application judged against the planning policy backdrop. This should be the basis of any decision. Our proposals will provide much needed affordable housing in a sustainable location. They will also provide a significant financial contribution to enhanced community facilities. The application has been extensively considered by your officers, who have recommended it for approval. I trust you will be able to give it your support. Thank you again for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sheldon. Please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Just to remind members before I open it up to the for discussion and debate, you've heard reference tonight to the tilted balance and the basket suite of policies. What I also need to point out at this point, that the tilted balance works in both ways, that other policies are live and still applicable. So bear that in mind when you're making your decision. I'll now open it up for debate.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask about the 106 obligation money that's mentioned in page 6 of the report. It talks about a contribution of £589,904 for secondary school places, and then £97,499 towards the local health infrastructure for the clinical commissioning group or the CCG, £100,000 towards the off-site multi-use games area, £10,000 towards the travel plan monitoring, and then it doesn't mention in section A on page 6, but it does in page 29, £150,000 towards improving the number 64 bus service in Loggerheads, and then we have the £225,000 for the sports and the recreation use. This comes to a staggering £1,172,403. If we look at section B in the recommendations, it says, should the sections 106 obligations referred to in section A not be secured within the above period, which is by the 30th of April 2024, the head of planning is given delegated authority to refuse the application on the grounds that without such matters being secured, the development would fail to be acceptable in planning terms. This I accept, But I don't accept the next bit that says, if he considers it appropriate to extend the period of time within which the obligation can be secured, surely that means that the period of time could be extended indefinitely. You'll just keep extending it. And then in 2, 3, 4 years' time, are we not likely to be sitting here voting on the 106 obligations being waived because the applicant or the developer has run out of money? So I'd just like clarification, please, on the Section 106 obligation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That second recommendation B is something that we put on all applications where there's a Section 106 recommendation. And the reason that it's there is we put that date on to try and focus the efforts of the applicants really in preparing the Section 106 agreement. So it's only there for the drafting of that legal agreement, because that takes, obviously there's lawyers involved on both parts, and it can take some time to get that document drafted and to be agreed and signed, etc. So we put the date on, in this case, the 30th of April, just to try and focus parties that is the date that we'd like it to be, that Section 106 agreement to be sorted and signed. But sometimes, inevitably, there are delays for whatever reasons, either on the part of the council or the part of the applicant, and it's not possible to get it signed by the 30th of April in this case. And so what that second recommendation is there for is to say, if it's not signed by that date, the head of planning has a delegated authority to say whether he agrees an extension. It might just be a couple of weeks because it's pretty much there and it just needs to be finalised, or it might be a little bit longer than that. But that's the only reason that is there. It's certainly not something that is intended to or ever results in these things going on and for that agreement to not be signed. Does that answer your question?
Do you wish to come back on that, Councillor Hutchins?
Is there anything that we can put in to say that the 106 money would have to be spent in loggerheads and not given to Market Drayton, for example, as Councillor Panter said?
Absolutely, and that's what, and I'm not really sure on the details of the one that Councillor Panter referred to, but Section 106s are very specific in what they require the money to be spent on. The money has to be spent on facilities that are necessary to make the development acceptable. So we've sought the views of the Education Authority, for example, and they're saying that the monies need to be spent on those particular schools. And the Section 106 is worded in a very specific way to require the monies to be spent in that way. So it's not acceptable for the money to go elsewhere. And as I say, I don't know the example that Councillor Panter is referring to. I'm not aware of that.
Any other councillors wishing to speak? Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Chair. I had a look and the assessment for Muckleston Wood Lane. It doesn't appear to be very clean cut for the pedestrians, cyclists, horses as such, with it being a rural location. Just wondered if we had any more information on how that was going to be dealt with. Thank you.
The off-site highway works on Muckleston Wood Lane that are proposed, or the general links?
General
links. So the application is supported by the transport assessment and the travel plans, and within that it is believed that there are suitable pedestrians and cycle links to the village. There is an acceptance that the development would
Please, officer, speak. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's the acceptance that the development would increase traffic movements along Muckleston Wood Lane, and that's why the off-site mitigation works are proposed to allow additional pedestrian refuge and additional cycle refuge. I don't know if, obviously we've got members of the Highway Authority here today, if they've got any further comments on that point, but from a highway safety perspective, in terms of additional pedestrian and cycle movements, it's considered to be acceptable.
Councillor Brown.
I was just going to see if highways have got anything further that they want to add to that.
Can I just add a question, please, while we're talking highways? Given that the officer said that the junction with the A53 at the end of Mucklestonwood Lane is substandard, wouldn't this be an opportune time to actually bring some improvements to that area? It's notorious for near misses, accidents, not always fatalities that tell the whole story there, but it's accepted that it's a very dangerous road, and it also services the estate and the whole village as it is now, without putting at least a minimum of 150 additional houses, which reasonably could be expected to have at least one car per property. So you're talking at least 300 extra movements a day, compounded on that lane that will no doubtedly use that as a shortcut to go to Newcastle way. I just wondered that has the opportunity been missed there to put some real improvements into the end of that lane, bearing in mind that the county highways has reservations of that particular site. And I know that very well because I asked for a scoping report when I was first appointed as a county councillor for improvements at that very site. Thank you.
The Crossroads junction. Okay. Sorry. So in terms of the Crossroads junction, that has been looked. Okay. There we go. Sorry. So in terms of the Crossroads junction, that's been looked at in a lot of detail, and that was one of the first things that, when the application was submitted, that was raised as a fundamental concern, mainly because of the lack of visibility when emerging from the junction to the the A53. So that was highlighted to the transport consultant, and they looked at, we did go out on site and have a look at the junction with the developer, not with the developer, with the transport consultant. And in terms of options to mitigate the development impact, we first looked at signalisation of the junction. But because there was limited land available to put the relevant apparatus into to verges and things like that, and also concern raised with our signal engineer in terms of intervisibility to signal heads, that option to improve the junction was not considered any further because of it not offering the safety improvements that were required. So the next option was then looked at the how to essentially reroute development traffic to avoid the junction.
Just was option considered compulsory purchase land around that site? I believe also that the land was offered by the landowner at one point.
I'm not aware of that offer. We did raise that point, but other options were taken forward. So the option that was taken forward was to minimise left turning movements out of the site along Mucklestonwood Lane towards the junction. The other option was to traffic calm Mucklestonwood Lane as well, to act as a deterrent for through traffic, but also to improve the road environment for shared use. And then in terms of the A53 traffic calming scheme and gateway enhancements, that was looked into in some detail, and that's what warranted the chicane being located where it is to slow approaching vehicles, so that the site stopping distances at that junction, because we've got speeds in excess of 30 miles per hour on the A53, nearer to 40 miles an hour. And that, in terms of improving the safety of that junction, it was considered that bringing the speeds down for vehicles approaching the crossroads, travelling in the northern direction towards Newcastle, that would allow for the achievable visibility displays to be closer to the requirements of the site stopping distances required. The main thing was that in terms of restricting movement out of the site access, that would mean that there was virtually no traffic, particularly during the PM peak and AM peak, that would be emerging at the crossroads. And they would be travelling through Eccleshaw Road onto the A53. We did look at journey times to see whether there was much of an extension to journey times, particularly to the A53 and Ashley Surgery, which is obviously opposite the crossroads. And in terms of journey times from travelling from the site to the A53 via Muckleston Road East or going via Eccleshaw Road, the difference in journey times was minimal. We're talking 30 seconds. I actually tested that today, and it's, I think, because obviously you've got the A53 is built to accommodate traffic flow, and then you've got Muckleston Wood Lane, which is a shared surface. It does naturally make drivers more aware of its surroundings, and then you adapt your vehicle speeds, and hence that's why it has relatively similar journey times that we're talking about here.
So would you say there was no additional harm then or risks for this development coming forward?
Yes. In terms of the off-site mitigation works being secured, then I don't see the development having any unacceptable highway safety impacts, particularly on that junction.
Can I ask if any data was acquired in terms of the road safety partnership, in terms of data for actual mean speed figures and the actual speeds that cars were travelling at that point?
Yes, so
and throughout the sites on Muckleston Wood Lane?
Yes, so the on the applicant secured, well, via the transport consultant, secured some accident data for the latest 5-year period, which goes from 2016 up to 2022. In that period, there was 5 accidents that were occurred within that period. And then since then, I've also gone to our road safety manager at Staffordshire County Council, who's confirmed that 1 additional accident has occurred since the personal injury collision data was submitted, and they've confirmed that yeah, there was just the 1 accident, which was not, it was on Pinewood Road, of Gravelly Hill Pinewood Road. They also confirmed that the junction in question is not identified as a cluster site, and it's on no list to be improved at any point.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan, does that answer your question? Or do you want to rephrase that again?
It does. The only other thing I'd add as well is that I know you've got police data and you're talking about accidents, but what about the large number of incidents that happen that maybe don't reach the police level or aren't involving the police? I believe there's a large number of incidents that occur that don't potentially reach that level. Do we have any information on those?
So unfortunately, near misses aren't recorded. So therefore, we cannot use that information as a baseline when it comes to road safety. We always refer to the latest road safety data available but made by the police. And generally that is when a injury has occurred, it will be recorded. There is no means of recording near misses, and it's not something that is required by the Department for Transport when assessing the development applications.
I mean, I'm sure if you ask local residents, I feel like they'd probably tell you a lot of stories about near misses, but no, I don't want to ask any more questions.
Thank you. You can't do that from the audience, I'm afraid. It's confined to councillors, and thank you.
I think I'd just add that in terms of, I think it was mentioned about speeds, that it is acknowledged that the speeds on the A53 are above the 30 mph speed limit. And hence that is one of the reasons why the off-site mitigation works has been requested.
I've just got one more question. Was it ever considered to change Muckleston Wood Lane into a one-way system?
That has been considered as an option, and yeah, we could still do that. That is an option. In terms of traffic regulation orders, that obviously goes to further public consultation, and that would need to be supported by the police for us to consider that as a viable option. But yes, that is just not an option that the applicant chose to progress.
But could be on the table in
Potentially, yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. Over to you, councillors. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of questions on two particular issues. First is really clarification to a term that's used very early on in the report, and that is the site, reference is made to the site lying within a landscape maintenance area. What is a landscape maintenance area, and how is it relevant to consideration of this application? My second topic, Chairman, do officers have a view on whether the bus service, the A64, offers a viable alternative to private cars in terms of getting residents to their places of work, college, etc.? Thank you.
So a landscape maintenance area, it's a designation within a saved policy from the current, well, the old local plan. So landscapes throughout the borough are designated as landscape maintenance areas, landscape restoration areas, or areas of landscape improvement. So it's based on a historic sort of landscape study in terms of the quality of that landscape. So this particular site falls within an area that's a landscape maintenance area. And on page 13, it talks about that policy, so policy N19, and that those are areas where the council will seek to maintain the characteristics of the landscape. So that's the designation for this site. In terms of the bus service, it is considered to be a viable alternative. It's the same public transport route that was used at the Baldwinsgate Farm site. So the number 64 bus service.
I'm afraid I beg to differ on that, officer. It has actually got worse since then in terms of actual bus routes provided. Including curfews that have been attached.
I think from the information I got from the current public transport routes, and in terms of that bus service, there were 5 services per day, which is, I believe, 1 less than that was considered at Baldwinsgate Farm. I think there were 6 in that case. But I don't think that is considered to be a significantly harmful reduction to the point where it is unviable. The inspector at Baldwinsgate Farm felt that the times and the interval of those bus services was a viable alternative. And I think we have to give that some considerable weight in considering this application.
Come on, Councillor Gordon. I'm afraid I'm biting my lip here. That,
Yeah, well,
I don't agree with that. But
Chair, if I may, I share your scepticism. I think those bus timetables, it would be a struggle, I think, for anyone to get to their place of work in Newcastle or Hanley using that particular bus. I think for anybody whose working pattern is beyond 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and as we know, Chair, a lot of people these days work in a very different way to that. I think it would be almost impossible to use that bus to get to work. Sorry, you've never convinced me otherwise.
So I agree with you, Councillor Gordon, knowing several people that have tried to conduct some sort of pattern in commuting. Councillor Bryan.
I was just going to add, living on the 64 route, I've tried to get the bus. The bus doesn't operate on a Sunday. So as Councillor Gordon says, unless you work Monday to Friday, you can't rely on it. And I've tried to use it for a recreational purpose and it's hard enough, let alone trying to use it to get to work for a reasonable time. So I can't help but agree.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. Very grateful to officers and representatives of the Highways Authority for answering some of our questions. I appreciate you can't hear me. I've got a very low voice, lulls people to sleep. I will lean into the microphone, but if you can't hear me, I'm afraid it's only necessary for me to be audible to the Chair and to the other members of the committee. Well, I was about to move refusal, but I guess if the audience don't want to hear it, okay. Here's where I'm coming from. I appreciate some of the concerns that have been raised tonight about highways and about access. Now, this is an outline application. Highways and access to the site are on the table. Everything else is reserved. So the map that we're looking for is on the screen is indicative. It may end up looking like that. It may not end up looking like that. I'm concerned that a reliance on highways, if we're looking for reasons why this might not be a suitable development, if we pin ourselves to the highway, and I've read both bits of the report and some of the objections. A lot of the objections relate to the impact this is going to have on the village, on traffic. I worry that you cannot argue with data. You may not like what the data says. You may have a big folder, as indeed one of the objectors does, that contains all of the highway stuff that was put together. But if we end up refusing this application, which we may do, I'm open, and we rely on the objections in relation to highways, I think we may well struggle to sustain that in an appeal setting. So my question to officers would be, what would your reaction be if this committee were minded to refuse the application on the basis of sustainability? Because we've heard from lots of people tonight that access and getting to and from this site is clearly unsustainable, that it is over-reliant on the motor car. Our officer, when it was put to her that the number of buses running on the number 64 bus route has been reduced over and beyond that which our officers had considered when they were making their recommendation. So it's great having a bus route, but if there aren't buses running on the route, it's not a viable route. We are being asked to approve legal agreements, S106s, that impose a minimum contribution of 30% of on-site affordable housing. These are people who you would imagine are more likely to need access to buses, to need those cycle improvements that we've heard may or may not be adequate to stop them all being turned into jam on the A53. And if we are going to insist on this being a development that includes that affordable housing, I love affordable housing, I love housing, we need more of it in the world, right? We need more houses. But if we're going to say we want this development to contain 30% affordable units out of 150, how is that sustainable for a village that doesn't have adequate public transport connections? So question to officers, sustainability as a reason for refusal, what is your view?
Yeah, in terms of an argument for refusal, I think sustainability grounds would be a viable reason for refusal, certainly over perhaps a technical matter, as you'd said, in terms of highways. And in terms of what makes a sustainable location, that is made up of a number of factors. So it would be for members to consider on what grounds they felt that this was not a sustainable location, i.e. there's been mention of the bus service and public transport routes.
So thank you. I'm inclined to agree with that. Yeah, there are lots of factors that we want to be looking at. I mean, my disappointment, so coming at it fresh, my disappointment is that we've moved in the past, refuse on the basis that developments are outside the village envelope. I understand that through the grinding of the appeal system, it's no longer possible to do that. So we've arrived in a world where development of agricultural land that is in open countryside is permitted because it's adjacent to a village envelope. Well, everywhere's adjacent to somewhere. And if we were to start saying, oh, well, that piece of land, well, it's next to somewhere that's already been developed. That is textbook urban sprawl and how it occurs. And I recollect what Councillor Panther said about Loggerheads no longer being a village and being on the route by 1,000 blows to becoming Loggerheads Garden City, but with none of the amenities that are essential and none of the infrastructure that is essential. And what I'm looking at on the screen, albeit an indicative diagram, is another addition of housing without necessarily seeing the necessary infrastructure that goes along with that. And I appreciate completely some of this is tied up in the S106s. So we're being asked to approve this on the basis that we're going to secure those. But are we really going to secure those? Do our officers have reasonable expectation that we're going to get all of that money and that we're going to get that provision of on-site affordable housing? Because I've been on this committee a long time and I remember us approving at outline stage Section 106 agreements that when it comes to the full planning application or reserved matters application, we're told, oh no, there's been a financial viability assessment. It turns out you can't have these things anymore. And by that stage, you've already conceded the principle of the development and you've already conceded whatever went along in that outline application. But we don't get, the residents don't get those things that we consider necessary. So I suppose a follow-up question to the officers is, how confident are you that all of that stuff that's in recommendation A is actually nailed on, that we're going to get that from, and I'm sure Shropshire Housing are lovely people, but they're not Staffordshire Housing, are they? Are we really in Staffordshire going to benefit from all of those things? There's me being hyper-local about it. I've always been a Staffordshire guy. You know, fair play to Shropshire. It's not Staffordshire. Do our officers genuinely, from their professional viewpoint, do you believe that all of that's going to be delivered if we vote for it tonight?
So yes, those factors would be delivered. So a Section 106 agreement is a legally binding document, and we are saying that subject to that being entered into, the contributions are required to make that development acceptable. There has been no discussion of viability, no case of viability made from the applicant at this stage. In fact, they've offered above policy compliant levels of affordable housing, of public open space provision, and the additional mugger contribution. If there was a case in the future, should it be permitted that there was then a viability issue, we would have to reconsider that agreement. The case would have to come back before members, and we would make a judgment of that. Some of those contributions would go to the county council in terms of the travel plans and the education contributions. They are monitored. There are trigger points as to when those payments need to be made. So the agreement would put in place the provisions to make those payments come to fruition.
Moving with a couple of comments that were passed by councillors. Councillor Hutchins talked about we could find ourselves sitting here in 3 or 4 years' time, facing a planning committee where the developer says that they can't afford the 106 monies anymore. And we're having to make a decision on there because of the way the legislation allows for that to happen. I'm just wondering I'm concerned about the harm that we're setting up people to go and live in affordable homes, essentially in the middle of nowhere if they're isolated. And I do know that goes on, and I do know that it's one of the things that once people are in affordable housing, they want to come away from loggerheads because of that isolation. I'm just wondering whether actually, in terms of harm, and our own housing officer who said that loggerheads is probably in the worst place to put affordable housing, because of that very fact, that affordable housing should be near places where services can be provided in close proximity for those people that are struggling, let's face it, to get on the first rungs of housing ladders, etc. I'm just wondering if we're setting people up for fail at the very first by considering affordable housing in this area. I agree that we should have it in the right place, though, and I don't think I'm convinced that we negated the harm that possibly that we're setting people up for fail over this.
The affordable housing provision, it is a policy requirement of any housing development. So there is always that need to provide affordable housing on a development site. It turns again to that argument of what is a sustainable location. And we as officers feel that there are sufficient local level facilities to support the development. We have comments from the Education Authority that subject to those payments, there are school places available to take the capacity. We have comments from the Care Board in terms of doctor provision that subject to a payment, this site can take that. So we do believe that those facilities would be available for residents. We have accepted that there would be a reliance on the car for higher order services, so leisure activities, higher order retail goods, your larger weekly shops. So there is a level of harm there to be considered in the balance in terms of access to those level of facilities.
Did you wish to come back, Councillor Holland, on that? Sorry,
No, we heard quite enough from me for the time being, but I will be happy to move a motion if other members don't.
I have a couple of questions on the views of consultees, mainly Staffordshire County Council Education Authority, and the calculations that require additional school places. There seems to be a disparity there from 42 primary school places and 30 secondary places. Do we suddenly lose 12 pupils there? I don't understand that. And also, if the calculations are made on 150 houses, would it be reasonable to assume that they probably have at least one child in each of them, bearing in mind the family houses? I don't see that quite makes sense, but it says here in the report that there's projected to be an insufficient number of school places in the local area to mitigate the impact of this development at the secondary phase of education. So could you enlighten us further on that? Because that seems to be a pretty harmful characteristic of having an extra development. I might be reading this wrong.
So I'll comment just in terms of the mitigation, and then I believe colleagues from the County Council will comment in terms of the calculations. So the calculation process that the County Education Authority will use will inform what capacity there is at both the primary level and at the secondary school level. So their response says that there would be an insufficient number of school places at the secondary school level to mitigate the impact of this development. And so on that basis, based on the need for additional capacity at the secondary school level, they have calculated the financial contribution that would be needed in order to offset that additional demand on secondary school places. And subject to that mitigation method in terms of the payment being in place, that there is capacity within the local school systems. I'll pass to colleagues now to answer the other point.
Although we are highway engineers, we have enough meeting with the education colleagues. They have pupil yield numbers. So generally speaking, in the county, for every 100 odd houses, generates generally 21 primary school children, 15 high school children, and 3 sixth form children. I take your point about the difference between primary and high school, but that's the data that they've researched and comes back with. I'm sure if they wanted a higher level of money calculated, they would use a higher figure, but all the data that they've got, that they're the figures are based on that.
Am I correct then that the assumption that the report here says that there's a insufficient number of school places in the local area? Am I correct in reading that?
I couldn't answer that because obviously it depends what the education department have come back with. All I've got is data on pupil yield.
Okay, fair comment.
Sorry, I will just come back. So it is correct. So the County Education Authority are saying that there are projected to be an insufficient number of school places to mitigate the impact of the secondary phase of education. So the project to provide additional places hasn't been fully determined. So they're therefore requesting a financial contribution to address that shortfall in spaces.
Thank you. Councillor Brocky.
Thank you, Chair. Talking about school places, it's not just places as in, you know, what you said about statistics and data. For every additional school place, you've got to look at the provision for special educational needs proportionate to the number of pupils. You've got to look at the provision for the provision of school meals, ancillary staff. It's not just simply a matter of a formula which allocates pupils to something rather nebulously referred to as a place. It's also going to increase traffic, because if you're going to increase the number of staff on site in schools adjacent to the area, you're also going to increase traffic on the roads, because clearly it's not a very realistic suggestion that each household yields so many children. I think it's a matter of what kind. You have to look at what kind of children, and the nature of children and their needs is very diverse. One would have to seek assurance from the county council that all these different levels of need that students have would be addressed. They're barely addressed in the schools we've got, for goodness sake. Never mind sort of having an unknown quantity of residents moving in and providing a yield of children without making proper provision for any number of variable levels of need these children may have. It doesn't seem to be enough money that's being provided for that. You know, speaking as a retired teacher, I absolutely I'm astounded that they think that that's enough money to provide additional places, even for a minimal yield of children who may move into the area, whether it's in affordable housing or not. That's my first comment. The other one is who's going to monitor, looking on the agricultural side and the sustainability side, if there are wildlife impacts in this area and, you know, integratory landscaping and other interesting rhetorical turns of phrase to keep the countryside pretty much as it is with 350 houses on it, but we do our best, and there's the hedges. Who's going to monitor the impact on wildlife? It's all right to have it as a theory, a little bit like the education thing as a theory. But who is going to monitor an increasing impact on wildlife without you? It's predicting what might happen, a bit like the children and other things that are involved with making new developments. But the predictions seem a little bit sanguine to me, because if you put things there that are going to impact on wildlife, and sustainability and vegetation and so forth, who is going to monitor day by day over the 2 years or however long it's going to take to build them? Never mind the amount of money they're going to cough up or not going to cough up at the slightest drop of a hat. Who's going to monitor whether these things are day by day, week by week, being kept in place and being controlled? Because the worrying thing is that there seems to be obviously an offer of money, which is laudable and obviously legally necessary. But worrying to me would be that if we pass this and, you know, in principle, that the way things like this go in this very unpredictable, tangential sort of way, building isn't as simple as a linear set of figures and plans, and the landscape can do all sorts of strange things, and they can discover all sorts of strange things in the process of building it. Who's going to watch what is being done and make sure, even if everything went according to plan, that it was staying within what we had hoped that it would stay in? if it was passed, because that would be my concern in passing it at all, because it does not seem to me to be sustainable in any way, and particularly with the last remarks about the yield of children. I'll think about that for quite some time, actually. Thank you.
Councillor Rocky, you no doubt probably gone through loggerheads recently and seen all the hedges that have been removed with all the other developments that have been going on. I share your concerns that it does seem to be quite prolific, and I agree, you know, that not always is the control boundaries there in place to monitor this. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Beeston.
Hi, with regard to sustainability in primary school places, I have read as many of the objections as I can. And it appears that children who are going to St Mary's Muckleston would be expected to walk along Rock Lane, which is an unlit mud track with no pavement, so just about wide enough for a car. I can't see many parents actually thinking of that as a safe alternative. With the other alternative going to, is it still Hugo Maynell, the school in Loggerheads? And there's actually no pavement at the end of Muckleston Wood Lane heading in that direction. So I fear those children are going to have to go to school by car, which isn't sustainable. There's another point I wanted to make. It's about the neighbourhood plan. Could I ask the planning team what weight they've given to Loggerheads neighbourhood plan?
So I'll address the neighbourhood plan first, because I think where the confusion lies is in terms of the weight we're giving to it in terms of the tilted balance. So we are not saying that the plan and its policies are out of date. So the report has fully considered the design policies, the transport policies, they are all still relevant and applicable. The development we're having to consider is in regards to a tilted balance. So we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, which engages paragraph 11D of the framework. And when situations like that occur, there is paragraph 14 of the NPPF that essentially says that when a neighbourhood plan is more than 5 years old and doesn't allocate housing, sorry, I'm trying to think of the word. The development being contrary to the neighbourhood plan is automatically not given significant and demonstrable weight. It is still given weight, and we still weigh that up in the balance. But because of the age of the plan in this occasion and the fact that it doesn't have those site allocations, we cannot give it significantly and demonstrable weight over and above all the benefits of the scheme. So the plan is still relevant and officers have considered the policies, but we have had to make that balance in terms of the weight that would be afforded to it when considering the development.
Could I ask how much over 5 years the plan is?
I've got that date. If you just bear with me, I can find that. Sorry, thank you. So the neighbourhood plan on the 15th of February 2019.
Sorry,
15th of February 2019 was when the Loggerheads neighbourhood plan was made. So the 5-year period from that was the 15th of February 2024.
So it's barely out of date, really.
The policy,
past
the NPPF says 5 years or less. So there's no sort of distinguishing 5 years, give or take a week. It's 5 years or less.
So if this had been heard at the previous planning committee a month ago, it would have been in date and you would have taken it into consideration. Is that right?
It would have been in date, and
Yeah.
I want to reiterate that we are giving the plan consideration. We aren't throwing out the plan. It would have been in date. However, to qualify for the paragraph 14 of the NPPF, it has to be less than 5 years old and allocate sites for housing. And it doesn't meet both. It doesn't actively allocate any sites for housing. So on that, it would have failed on that point. But I think regardless of the interpretation of paragraph 14, our basket of policies overall is out of date. So we would always be engaging the tilted balance, regardless of how we would interpret paragraph 14.
Okay, could I ask how it was decided it came to this meeting and not the previous meeting?
Yeah, I was aiming to get it to the last January committee. Some of the latest comments that were received from residents raised concerns about the lack of a BAT survey in terms of the application. I, as an officer, didn't feel confident bringing that application to a planning committee if I was not satisfied that from an ecologist's expertise point of view, that those surveys were required. So essentially the delay was on the basis of us obtaining further ecological advice that we were in a position to bring the item to committee with a recommendation of BAT surveys as a condition, as opposed to being obtained as part of the application.
Thank you. With regard to the BAT survey, is it the case that the ecologist didn't actually visit the site?
That is what she said within her application, within her comments.
Is that usual?
I would say in terms of an assessment that, I mean, I'm not an ecologist, but they will have a wealth of material available in terms of the location of species, recorded species data, the type of that habitat in terms of the grassland, etc. So there will be a lot of that required. And she is a county officer, ecological expert that's chartered in both of those fields. So I would say yes, that would be a normal practice.
And does the time of year that the person does the survey, does that affect what they find?
So the ecologist wouldn't have done a survey as such. The ecological appraisal that was submitted with the application, there are certain times of year when certain surveys should take place. So bats have a season, obviously birds have the bird nesting season. So those surveys do have a particular time frame as to when they should take place. But I wouldn't say that an officer, in terms of assessing the ecological sort of status of a site, has to do that at a certain time of year. And her response certainly didn't indicate that was the case.
Okay, because I believe Rock Lane's a back corridor, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Holland's comments, I was wondering if there was two other potential areas that we could look at maybe for refusal. One of them being the loss of the best and most versatile agricultural land, and another one being the vista of White House Farm. Would either of those be reasons that we could look at for refusal?
They would be, and certainly if you, in terms of making up that argument of a sustainable location, those are all factors that weigh into what makes a location sustainable. I think what I would say in terms of White House Farm is what we referred to at the start, is that setting is more than just a view. So our conservation officer was certainly the opinion that the view is very important to that building and is perhaps elevated by its mention within the listing of that building, the listing description. But setting of White House Farm is also the rest of the agricultural holding that you can't see, the barns that are to the rear of the site. So that all needs to be considered, and whether it's setting as opposed to interrupting a view. But it certainly is something that could be explored.
Thanks for that, Councillor Ryan. I believe that the White House Farm is the highest farm in England, I'm informed, with unique views over the Welsh Hills, Shropshire, Cheshire Plain and Staffordshire. It's fairly unique in terms of the local tourism, hence the caravans that are on site there almost permanently throughout the year. Councillor Holland, at this point, I was going to propose a comfort break before I allow John in and then yourself, because I'm aware people have been sitting for 2 hours now, and I think it's only fair that we at least offer them 5 or 10 minutes to stretch their legs. I certainly do my Be back here for 9 o'clock. That'd be appreciated. Thank you. Do you know that hasn't been done since we were in the old building? Has it? And Jeff claims I broke it. Okay, if people could settle down quietly, I realise you're not all in your seats, but if you can settle down as soon as possible, please, we'll carry on. Hopefully it won't be too late now. Thank you for your patience. We resume the meeting. Councillor Holland.
Forgot what I was going to say now, Chair. You might want to go to another councillor first.
Okay, I'll take Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My point is on landscape and visual impacts. I'm disappointed we haven't got any views from the west into the site. At the Tadgale Quarry planning application, the people at the White House Farm complained that we spill their views. So, like I say, the views from the west looking in.
Yeah.
And this, to me, that this estate will stick out like a sore thumb. It will destroy the rural setting. We pride ourselves on our countryside and views on our countryside. And we know in planning we can't point somebody complains about from their properties, developments that spoil their view. But the view from outside, looking in to Loggerheads, and I think, as you've said, it's the Ice Point, or the Ice Farm, you've said it, Mr. Chairman. So this development is elevated and looking from the Cheshire Plain into Loggerheads, it will completely destroy the rural setting. Now, the other point I'd like to make, or the question to the highways, I find quite extraordinary, really, is this laybys for pedestrians along Muckleston Wood Lane. Now, I've walked lanes in the past linking public rights of way, and a cars come, you can dash into these little pockets, you know, you're protected from the traffic. Just doesn't make sense at all. I mean, cars will come at a speed, and pedestrians can only walk at what, 2 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour. So could I ask that question about the point of those additional highway improvements? And also the impact, ask the officers about the views from the Cheshire Plain into this particular development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Just in terms of the views into the site, obviously, if you were looking into the site from the west, we've now currently got the Tadgedale Quarry development in place. So that would to effect already screen views from that vantage point. And I would say that the tree boundary here along Rock Lane is quite substantial. So I'll just go back to a few images, just bear with me. So this is obviously in the winter. So this is just looking from Muckleston Wood Lane at the gated access to the far sort of northeastern corner of the site. So you're looking towards Rock Lane here. And you've got this very dense tree boundary. So you can just about see the roofscape there of Tadgedale Quarry. So if you were looking from the opposite side of Tadgedale Quarry into the site, I don't believe that you would see any sort of wider landscape implications. In terms of the topography of the site, it slopes upwards towards White House Farm from west to east. So the land slopes in this direction up towards the eastern boundary of the site. So in certain aspects from this particular point, this is the far northwestern corner of the site. So you can see how the land slopes here, and you've got White House Farm just visible at the top of the hill. Now, obviously, we're not considering details in terms of design, layout, scale at this stage. But I think we were satisfied that in terms of the topography, a suitable scheme could be designed that would ensure that impact on the landscape was minimised. And then taking the same view from White House Farm, you can just see here where I'm running my cursor. This is the eastern boundary hedgerow of the site. So above that, you've got the tree canopy from the planting on the opposite side of Rock Lane. So roofscapes from this site would, as you can see here, the roofs of the houses that are on Rock Lane would perhaps interfere at this level. But certainly those wider vantage points viewing out from White House Farm, we believe would be maintained in terms of the Shropshire Hills.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not talking about views from Eccleston Road. I'm talking, as we look at that map, if you go over the tree line, you can see green fields. That's the point I'm making. Looking back into the site, you'll just see a sea of housing, a sea of roofs. And that, you know, to my way of thinking, that will completely destroy the landscape. Thank you.
I think you, Councillor, you're talking about the entrance to White House Farm, as you could look in towards the Welsh Hills, and yeah, at the top of Muckleston Wood Lane.
In terms of your comment about the need for the build outs along Muckleston Wood Lane, the main focus for the requirement for those is being the increase of vehicular traffic, particularly coming from the A53 towards the site. There was a number of speed surveys that were done along Muckleston Wood Lane, and one of the speed surveys indicated that speeds were quite above the 30 mph speed limit. They were 39.2 mph. In terms of there is it's used as an existing shared surface, and it's evident whenever I've gone out on site, there are people walking in the carriageway, and it doesn't appear to me that people feel uncomfortable walking along the route. I've walked it myself and I don't feel unsafe when doing it. I think it's important as well, with it being a rural road, that you wouldn't want to urbanise the road itself and retain that character that is already there. So in terms of the build out features that have been proposed, they're there to to reduce speeds along Muckleston Wood Lane to create a better environment for shared use, offering betterment to the existing use of Muckleston Wood Lane, and also for an increased pedestrians and cyclists that may want to walk in along Muckleston Lane, which from what I can tell, it's mainly used for leisure purposes, in terms of maybe a link round the estate, rather than an avenue where to get to local services within loggerheads. We've also considered that the Department for Transport have a quiet lanes and home zones regulation, which it states that rural roads where you have vehicular traffic less than 1,000 two-way movements a day, they're acceptable, providing that certain conditions are met. One of those being that vehicle speeds must be below 36 mph. So that was one of the other considerations in terms of reducing speeds along Muckleston Wood Lane to make it meet the Department for Transport regulations and to provide that safer environment for existing pedestrians and cyclists that currently use Muckleston Wood Lane, and also address the impact of the development.
Can I ask just while we're on that point, how are you going to the word dissuade people from turning left? How's that going to work?
In terms of the access arrangement?
Yeah.
So in terms of the access arrangement, the angle of entry is acute, and the thinking behind this is that it will make it difficult for vehicles to exit the site. Obviously, in terms of it's not foolproof. You will potentially have people that will try to exit the site and turn left. However, the traffic calming features along Muckleston Wood Lane may act as a deterrent for residents in terms of thinking that would be an appropriate route. And also there's also the mitigation scheme at the on the A53, the speed reduction scheme, essentially to improve the safety and for people to feel more comfortable when they are merging from the junction onto the A53. In terms of traffic impact from the development, particularly during the peak periods, it's considered that anyone that does choose to exit from the site and turn left, even though there are measures in place such as the access arrangement, that will be minimal. And that in terms of obviously it's an existing junction with no safety record as such, that the Highway Authority would not feel confident in stating that it would cause an unacceptable highway safety impact.
Councillor, have you regained your memory?
Well, I have, but I was going to offer the representative of the Highways Authority an opportunity to clarify or to correct herself. What she said was that the design of the exit from this proposed estate is meant to make it difficult to exit the estate. That is what she said. I think what she meant to say was it is discouraged or difficult to turn left on exit from the estate. So we are supposed to be agreeing a safe access. That's one of the things that is in front of us tonight. Can I press the point and ask, is it a no left turn? And will there be a sign? Will it be the case that people are committing a moving traffic offence if they do choose to turn left out of this junction? And if not, why not? Secondly, and I think I understand because of what is at the other end of this, at the other end of Muckleston Wood Lane, it is very strange to me that we are encouraging drivers to turn across a moving lane of traffic in order to get out of their homes. Normally, when you have an arrangement like this, you are encouraging motorists to turn left because they are moving with the flow of traffic, not across it. So can the officer comment on that? Sorry.
Yeah. And just in terms of what you're saying about the traffic and the turning left, right out of the junction, a lot of that comes down to gap acceptance. They have obviously how busy the road is. Obviously, Muckleston Lane is not that busy, so there'd be no real problem in turning left or right out of the site. In terms of you're not gonna be sat there in a queue waiting for a gap to appear before you can make that manoeuvre.
Will it be a moving traffic offence if you do turn left? Will it be enforceable, or are we just going to say ever so nicely, please don't turn left?
The funding for a TRO hasn't been secured via Section 106. It was not. When it comes to a banned right turn, obviously you need the support from the police authority in order for it to be enforced. It was It's not envisaged that it would be a ban term. Basically, in terms of it being enforceable, it's enforced by design. That is the approach that the applicant has taken, the designer has taken, and it's a means of access design that is suitable. It's been tracked with multiple vehicles, the largest design vehicle, and it's also been assessed by Amy Infrastructure Plus partners and their design team, and they have agreed that it's a suitable access design. It's also been subject to a road safety audit stage 1, and no fundamental highway safety concerns have been raised in terms of its design.
Question, Councillor Holland.
It does answer the question. I was thinking about something we heard a little bit earlier from the Highways Authority relating to the junction in the opposite direction. So if you were to turn left coming out of this, you'd eventually arrive at that crossroads. And we heard earlier that you can't make the crossroads safer because it's a very unsafe crossroads. And that, I think, is crystallizing in my mind an objection to this, a reason for refusal, which is that there are some basic issues of infrastructure here, which, if they're not answered, make this a very unsuitable, unsustainable site for further housing and mitigate, I think, against any radical building programs, in Logheads Town, as it perhaps should be called, without serious consideration being given to all of the infrastructure improvements that are necessary. So I'm minded to mitigate against the application on that basis. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Harland. Hold that thought in mind. Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Chair. From earlier conversations when we talked about things that we could refuse this application on, I was wondering if it would be possible now to propose to refuse the application. There will be obviously some clarity needed from officers, but the initial things then that we've mentioned already would be the unsustainable location, the loss of the best, most versatile agricultural land, the vista of White House Farm, potentially the character of the area, and then now whether we look at the infrastructure also. Thank you.
So, Councillor, are you proposing that as a refusal on those matters?
I am, yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other councillors wishing to speak on this? Councillor Burnett.
I'd just like to say that I'd second Councillor Bryant's.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Do we have any members wishing to speak for the application? That was a quick withdrawal. That Councillor Williams.
Could I ask a question? Could I ask the officer, is there any merit in the point I made about views and the destruction of the rural setting?
Councillor, I believe that's
adding that to the refusal.
I believe that this Councillor Bryan was driving at that matter in terms of
driving
at that matter in terms of protecting the vista and the asset that's there, the heritage from the outside. Yeah, from the outside. Do comment. Councillor Fee? Sorry, I thought you were indicating. Councillor.
Perhaps, Chair, you were about to move to a vote, and I think perhaps we should. As councillors, with mindful of the fact that there is a substantial audience for this in terms of residents who are concerned about the application, we should be clear about what we're including and what we're leaving out when it comes to reasons for refusal. Because, as I said a little bit earlier, there are some reasons which you might ordinarily think, actually, that's quite a good reason for refusing an application, and you can't include it because we know that at an appeal stage, those sorts of things are likely to fail, and not to just fail, but to count against us in relation to a cost decision. And the last thing that I want, as a representative of some of the people in the audience in the public gallery tonight, and also as a responsible member of the Borough Council, is for us to have their money, their taxpayers' money, going to fill the pockets of lawyers defending or prosecuting this council in a public inquiry. So So if it's possible, can we have a summary? Are our officers happy with the discussion that we've had, and have they formed a brief sort of series of reasons for this refusal, or do they need members to be more explicit? Because I would like to be able to vote now with confidence, so we know what we're including and what we're not including, not because we don't consider it, but because we have weighed up properly all of the different factors.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Do we have a clear indication from first Councillor Holland's proposal, then Councillor Bryan's? Go. Okay.
Yeah, just want to clarify a couple of points that were raised. So in terms of Councillor Williams, your point, I wanted to clarify, was your concern in relation to the harms to the heritage asset and its setting, or was it in terms of general landscape harm and the impact on those rural views from external vantage points?
The rural views from the
thank
west
you.
looking
Yeah.
into. Yeah.
Thank
because
you.
It's the only really elevated site round Loggerheads. If people know the area, people looking in, it will destroy that, that, you know, yeah, thank you.
No, but Mhm. Sorry. The other point I just wanted to clarify was there was mention of an unsustainable location, but I think that needs some sort of, in terms of what factors do you believe makes it an unsustainable location? So there's been reference to infrastructure, there's been reference to bus routes. So I think that needs to be clarified in terms of that point. And then finally, I don't know if in terms of infrastructure, there was also reference to highway infrastructure within that. I wanted to clarify if we're going there for a highway safety reason for refusal, or that is being interlinked into the unsustainable location element.
In terms of the unsustainable location, I think we're definitely talking about the infrastructure as one of those elements, but whether we think it's better to include it separately, I'll take guidance on that. We also need to talk about, the public transport routes and what's available to these potential residents to get to work, to get to the doctors, to get to a hospital, to get to basic services that we potentially would be not permitting them to. Clarify as well, when we mentioned about the vista of White House Farm, just that we're also protecting the heritage of the assets as well, please, just to make sure that's included. Thank you.
I think perhaps we could have a reason for refusal that makes reference to it being an unsustainable development on the grounds of loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, reliance on public, on the car, so the lack of access to public transport facilities. Well, I was going to say that could perhaps be one reason. Then we could have another reason that was the impact on the setting of the listed building. And another reason that was the impact on the character and appearance of the area. But it was perhaps we need to be a bit clearer in terms of when you're talking about the infrastructure of the area, whether you want a specific highway safety reason for refusal, or I didn't really get the gist of what you were saying there.
Well, I think I've made a number of comments. What we're going to vote on is Councillor to my right. She's made a proposal. It's been seconded by Councillor even further to my right. So Councillor Bryan's motion, and it's Councillor Burnett that's seconding it. When I spoke of the infrastructure, I think in the widest sense, what I mean is if you are going to have large amounts of new housing in the open countryside, if you're going to have it, it needs to come with additional infrastructure. It needs to come with all of the things we've discussed, like school places, access to GP surgeries, and proper highways upgrades. The problem with the town planning system that exists in our country is that none of that is necessarily guaranteed. And if you do it by 1,000 blows, if you have Tadgedale Quarry developed, and then you have this site developed, and then you have the site next to it and the one next to that, Nobody ever makes a firm appraisal and says, no, this is the point at which all of the roads need to be of a certain standard. And we've heard from the Highways Authority that they've looked carefully at maintaining the rural character of some of these highways or the lanes. And they said, well, we don't want to urbanize. The exact words of the representative of the Highways Authority, we don't want to urbanize some of these roads. Well, I'm afraid, actually, if you're going to have lots and lots of new housing in an area, you do, because otherwise it's just unsafe for children to walk to school along an unlit country road, for cyclists to have to navigate what seems to me to be some quite unusual mitigation measures or highways measures that are being put in. So I want to be clear, I'm not moving highway safety as an independent reason for refusal. But if officers can understand me when I say we're refusing this, and part of the reason why it's unsustainable is that there simply is not the infrastructure. There simply are not the amenities. What the residents are telling us and what we understand to be the case is that you are tacking on an extra dormitory village to a village that doesn't have the infrastructure there. And I mean that in the widest sense, not just the highways. I mean, you know, access to shops, GP places, schools. That is one of the ways in which we characterize how unsustainable it is. It is not a separate highway safety objection. And I say that advisedly because I know that if we do make a separate highways objection, there is an extremely detailed report and there is a lot of data that the Highways Authority have shown that indicates that on the face of it, that is not an adequate thing for us to be arguing. But I feel very strongly that the sustainability angle that Councillor Bryan has laid out is a firm and defensible reason for refusing this application.
So, shall we go with unsustainable location due to the loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, the limited access to public transport, the lack of appropriate infrastructure with particular reference to the highway network as one reason for refusal. Then a second one, the impact on the listed building, and then a third one, the impact on the character of the area. Yeah, I think our you want to have a word with me? Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Hey, members, would you like to just read back where we are, please?
Okay. So, adverse impact on the character and appearance of the area and views into the site. Loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, impact on the setting of the listed farmhouse, and then an unsustainable development due to the lack of infrastructure available locally and the need to travel by car to access higher level services.
Point the four views across into like not from Ecclesfield Road, but farther back into the countryside, looking in.
From Muckleston Wood Lane at the top.
We'll see. You'll see a piece of roofs.
I think.
Do you understand what I'm saying? It's impact.
I think it's just better to keep it general, a character and appearance general reason for refusal, and then if we got into an appeal situation, we could then be more specific about what. Yeah, because we don't want to limit ourselves by just referring to one particular view at this stage.
You've got open countryside.
Yeah.
With that, any further additions, any amendments? Okay. We've had it proposed and seconded. We'll take it to a vote now, please. Would members like to show vote in favour by raising the hands now, please? In favour of the proposal for resolution for refusal. And that's unanimous. Unanimous, thank you. I'll just recess for those that may wish to go now. Could I remind you to leave the building fairly quickly and quietly, please, so we can carry on? Some of us don't want to be here past midnight. Press. You look tired. I have you all together. if we do need, of course, to vote by okay. You'll be able to, if you, when the minutes come out, they'll be all on here. Well, they'll be printed on the website, yeah? Okay, thank you. Members, we may need to go in session after 10 o'clock. Are you okay to do that? To conclude the business? Thank you. Okay, item 5 on the agenda. Application for major development, Victoria Street, Newcastle. Over to you guys.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There has been an update on this application. So since the publication of the agenda, the applicant has confirmed that the off-site open space contribution requested by the council's landscape development team would make the scheme financially unviable. So subsequently, the applicant has requested that the application be deferred to a later meeting to allow time for a viability assessment to be submitted in support of the proposal, and then to allow time for that information to be sent to an independent valuer for consideration. So at this time, officers recommend that the decision on the application be deferred to allow further time for consideration of the issue of financial viability.
Move it, Chair.
Thank you. I'll second that from the chair. Those in favour of deferral? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 6 on the agenda is application for minor development, Newcastle under Lyme, Borough Council Depot, Norton Lane, Newcastle. Who's taking this one? Okay.
More insignificant minor application than the last one. It's for very minor alterations to the council depot building. Very briefly, this is the site here. So this is the entrance in off Norton Lane. This is the depot building. And there are some minor alterations proposed to the front elevation there and to the rear elevation of that middle section. So very quickly, that is how it is currently. So that the top one is the front elevation and the bottom one is the rear, and proposing a roller shutter door, some double doors there, and the bricking up of some windows along this elevation. So the reason that this has come before the committee is purely because it's a council application. And just in case anyone doesn't know the building, there's a photo. So that's it.
Is Woken.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't agree with the officer. This is a noble edifice, and this is not a trivial application. But I'm thoroughly in support of what is proposed here, and I would like to move it.
Any other councillors wishing to speak on this? Councillor Crisp. Are you sure?
Yes, I'm very sure.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And it proposed and seconded that we accept this proposal. Those in favour, please raise your hands now. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 7 brings us to application for a minor development, land to the south of the A52, Liverpool Road, Newcastle. Over to you, guys.
You on this one, but this is an application for full planning permission for the temporary storage of excavated materials from the multi-storey car park site. So you can see on the screen, the multi-storey car park is going in here, and clearly a lot of material will be excavated from the piling and excavations that are going on. And rather than taking that completely off the site, and then when the remainder of the site, of the wider site, becomes developed, having to bring materials on, the proposal is to store the materials here for a temporary period. So no plans to show you really, because it will just be a pile of rubble. But you'll see that there are conditions recommended, and one of those is that the height of the mound should not exceed 2 metres, and it is for a temporary period of just 2 years.
Hi, members, there is a supplementary report on this, and I'm presuming you've familiarised yourself with this. Over to you. Councillor Williams, then Councillor Holland.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It's just the route of the vehicles. I can see that red line that goes across. Will they destroy the raised pavement there? And what effect will that have on the car parking? Because I do park on there when I come into town. And will it stop people parking on the car park that's left over from the larger car park? It's the route of the vehicles. You know, I thought they would come up the road, then turn in the top entrance. But by that, it's going through the bottom. But I can't see how the big vehicles can manoeuvre around that spot. You can just see the raised footway, or whatever you want to call it, verge on that plan. Thank you.
Before I ask the officers to come back, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. You can have it all, my empire of dirt. I just wanted to draw attention to the letter of objection that had been received, because I feel much the same as lots of people. We want to see development of the Rycroft getting on. We want to see movement. We want to see things happening. I think I'm satisfied, though, that nothing we're agreeing tonight is going to make that slower. And if anything, it will make it slightly faster for the contractor to be able to get on with the excavation work that's necessary. So I'm minded to move the recommendation as printed. Thank you.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Councillor Holland, and I'd be happy to second that from the chair. Do we have any other counter proposals? Oh, sorry, Councillor Williams. I do beg your pardon.
There is a construction management plan that's been submitted that accompanies the application, and that sets out that material will be transported, accessing the site from Rycroft, entering the site from Corporation Street, sorry. The vehicles will then be loaded and then exit again via Corporation Street. And the Highway Authority have said that they've got no objections to the proposal, subject to compliance with the construction management plan, which is one of the recommended conditions you'll see there on the agenda report.
Any other questions? Okay, we've had it formally proposed and seconded. Those in favour of the recommendations as written, please indicate now. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us on to an old favourite. Item 8 on the agenda, Boggs Cottages, Keel.
No further update, Chair.
Are we content with the contents of the report that we have and to keep it on the agenda? Please show your hands in favour of that, please. Again, that's unanimous. Thank you. Brings us on to item 9, urgent business. I'm not aware of any urgent business. Have you any urgent business? Any urgent business, everybody? Besides that, yeah. I knew that had happened, you know. Vote on it. So there's no urgent business. So it just remains me to thank you very much for taking part this evening, for your help, and diligence and patience, and have a safe journey home. The meeting is now closed.